Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Your Spiritual Journey. This is Dr. Bob, and this is the space and the place where we talk about things important to your soul. As always, we ask you to like us, support us by subscribing, and maybe even support us on Patreon. And before I get started with our guest, I just wanted to mention that our plans for going to Bali in 2026 are full speed ahead. People have begun to sign up for that trip. And if you're interested in taking a trip with us on a spiritual journey to Bali, just contact me through our website, yourspiritualjourneypodcast.com. So today's guest is someone who I met at an ARE event. If you're not familiar with the ARE, that's the Edgar Cayce Foundation. And it was a regional event. And when I ran into Anne, I was very excited about the work that she was doing with the Akashic Records. And we'll get into that as well as some of the other things that she's been doing. But before we do that, just by way of introduction, Anne assists her clients who are seeking to create positive change in their lives. Because no matter where you are in your journey, whether just beginning or seeking deeper expansion, Anne provides the guidance and support you need to grow with confidence. She offers a unique blend of practical expertise and channeled wisdom to help clients unlock their true potential. And boy, is that an exciting approach to the work that she does. She has a rare combination of executive-level leadership and deep spiritual practice sets her apart in the energy healing space. With an accomplished career in business leadership and federal service, where she worked in sales strategy, negotiations, and public advocacy, she has cultivated a profound understanding of human potential. This expertise, merged with years of energy therapy study and practice, allows her to bring a grounded yet expansive perspective to guiding individuals across the globe toward clarity and transformation. Through Akashic Records sessions, Gleam personal development workshops, speaking engagements, and tutoring, Anne empowers clients to strengthen their intuition, align with higher wisdom, and step into greater self-awareness. So she's got a lot going for her, and she offers a lot to those of us who might seek out her services. So if you're ready to step into your highest potential, take a listen to what Anne has to say, but first we'll start with her personal spiritual journey. Anne, the mic's all yours.
Okay, well, thank you so much, Dr. Bob, and especially thank you for this opportunity for me to self-reflect. in preparing for our time together, I never really sat down and put all of the pieces together, and just so many memories came up. We don't have 60 years for me to go through everything, but certainly I look forward to sharing with you some of those things that I feel were extremely impactful in my spiritual growth and my personal growth, my professional growth. And I will have to start, I guess, taking you back to when I was 10 or 11 years old. Okay. So I'm going to start there. And I can remember opening the doors to this wooden book cabinet that my mother had in the corner of the dining room. And I think that it used to be a television cabinet, no longer television in there, but books. I was always an avid reader. And so when I would open that cabinet, it was really like treasure. And I will tell you that I came across a book at that early age that profoundly affected my entire life. And when I read the book, I remember, this is how vivid it was, I remember this physical feeling of knowing, and knowing that this, my truth, was in this book. And I know that you know this book. And it was called The Power of Positive Thinking by Dr. Norman Vincent Peale.
Right.
Now, that book was first published in 1952. So by the time it was like 1970, this was no longer new thought.
Right.
But what the basic premises of the book, they were first that our thoughts create our reality, that we all have divine support, and through visualization and determination on what it was that we want to accomplish, and by putting all of that together, that we could succeed in life. And when I talk about success, I would probably define it most about having like peace and contentment in your heart. So when I talk about success, I'm not talking about, being a rocket scientist. I'm talking about that inner success that you get. Now, when I think about that book, it is very heavily based on Christianity, which really fit into how I was being raised. I was eighth out of 9 siblings.
Oh my.
Born to devout Catholic parents.
Okay.
So the references in the book made complete sense to me, but I do, when I just described it to you, I said, I changed some of the words, and I said that we have divine support. So my definitions have changed since I was 10, but yet the premise of all of that I just said has come to be the cornerstone for me of how I have approached life, how I have approached my spiritual growth, and how I serve, and how I still serve today. And I want to describe that a little bit more, but I just feel so fortunate to have come across that and to have it make such an impact on me.
Yeah. Did your mother ever know the impact of this book on you, since it was one of her books?
I will say no, not particularly.
Okay.
However, my mother did come to know completely how I approached life.
Mm-hmm.
She was fully supportive of me. She was my greatest cheerleader. I was very fortunate.
Yeah.
So now I'm going to jump ahead to my teens and 20s.
Okay.
And I would say, if I had to judge myself, that I was very well adjusted, mentally, emotionally, very well adjusted. But there was one thing that would creep in that I didn't quite deal with, and that was this fear that I had. And the fear was that of the esoteric, the paranormal, the mystical, death. I just had this great fear. So how did I handle it? I would just shut down any conversation. Luckily, I didn't have anyone who was very close to me pass away in those years. So I just pushed it away. I didn't watch any scary movies. I didn't like staying home alone, because if I heard a creak in the floor, my imagination would run away from me. And I just tried to push it away.
Yeah.
That was all well and good until I got to my early 30s. So we're moving up in the decades.
Okay.
Got to my early 30s, and unfortunately, my father passed away rather suddenly. And he had physical problems, but we thought that he basically had that under control, and it was rather sudden. So I found myself dealing with not only grief and loss and sadness, but also shock. And at the time, as my own relationship with God was developing, I realized now with the love that I had from my dad, and I get emotional just talking about it, but I knew that my dad would never scare me. So I also knew that because I believed in an afterlife, that I wanted to be home with God and that that's the ultimate. I just couldn't fathom not continuing a loving relationship of some kind with my dad, or at least knowing that he was still supportive of me. You know, a
Mhm.
lot of times Catholics, we think of guardian angels or things like that. So I felt this like little crack opening that maybe it's safe enough because I know my dad would never scare me. But as I reflected more on that, and I don't even mean like through mediumship or anything. I wasn't at that point yet. I
Yeah.
was just at wanting to feel that love and support from my dad. Um, and I realized at that point, because I'm now maturing, I'm in my early 30s, and I thought, this is crazy that I just push these subjects away. You know, certainly there have been other fears that come into our lives. How have I dealt with those fears? But yet I'm still holding on to this. And I realized that how I dealt with other fears was through education. Learning about something that I didn't
Mhm.
understand. And then really understanding, is there something to be afraid of? And I decided at that time, because of wanting this continued support and love from my dad, and probably was sort of one way because I wanted that childhood support,
Yeah.
um, I decided to dive right into it. And, you know, back in those days, that was before the internet. So for us to educate ourselves, we either went to the library or we went to the local bookstore, and there may have been, you know, a couple shelves of books that we could choose from. And I was very careful because of my fear. I only wanted to choose books to start out with that sort of agreed with my belief in God. And I was so fortunate to come across a series of books as my first introduction. Um, the author was a woman named Sanaya Roman, and the book, it was a series, and the first book was called Living with Joy. And then the parts of the series, you know, had to do with connecting to your intuition, connecting with your higher self, um, channeling. Oh, and by the way, Sanaya actually channeled these books through her guide named Oren. And that also was a huge new concept for me. Yeah, like that was big. But I will tell you that it was the best series of books that I could have ever started out with because her style was so nurturing and safe and easy to understand. And it really aligned with some of the things that I talked about with, you know, my beliefs and on how thoughts create your reality and the things that I mentioned in Dr. Peel's book. So that just started my quest of just diving in deeper, and found that my curiosity was just unbelievable. And I came to love just studying anything that I
Mhm.
could about the metaphysical, death even. And so that began my education, and I quickly released those fears that I had. So now I'm going to fast forward to my early 40s.
Okay.
We're getting up there. So in my early 40s, I come to find myself a single parent, a divorced parent of 3 young children. And I was diagnosed with a form of cancer. Completely unexpected. Of course, who expects that, right?
Yeah.
We don't expect that. And just with the chaos, by this time I am working my way up the corporate ladder, having some success with that, certainly having success with the children, but how I approached everything at that time, because I think because of all of this responsibility I felt, was to basically handle it like a business. So, okay, let's bring it on. Let's deal with it, move it aside, and we move to the next thing. That's how every single day in my life was back then, because I was basically holding on to a thread to accomplish everything that I needed to accomplish. And so that's what I did. I had the surgery. Luckily, it was caught early, so I just had to have surgery. I didn't need chemo. I didn't need radiation. I was so fortunate. However, in the surgery, they mistakenly injured other organs, and that required additional surgeries, and then my recovery time was just pushed longer and longer. But handled it like a business transaction and just did it, got done with it, pushed it aside, thinking, okay, that's behind me now. I'm completely healed. Let's move on. Well, as things come to pass, a couple years later, I started having problems again. And through many tests and doctor appointments, I found out that I was actually having issues that arised from the original surgery, so side effects of the original surgeries. Well, by this time, I just did not have time in my life for this. And I would say, even with all my studies, I still was reverting back to that whole thing. Okay, let's deal with it, move it aside. But yet it was really affecting me. Like, I was just in shock, first of all, because I did lead a healthy life. I ate well. I was always very active and exercised. And I just did not expect this. So what did I do? I actually found myself moving into the victim mentality. Why me? How could this happen to me? I was just like, oh my gosh, it just couldn't happen to me. And one day, that's so clear in my memory, I found myself going into the bathroom and locking the door, which is what single mothers have to do sometimes.
Yeah.
They just, for that moment of peace, right? I get in there, I lock the door, and I start sobbing. It was after, I had come from the doctors and we had set up all of the procedures that would be done. And then, I spiral into, who am I going to get to help me with the kids and work and all of that? Well, I start sobbing, and I'm really in the victim mentality about, why me? Why me, Lord? Why me? But as I'm sobbing, I carried it to like the nth degree, and it moved to blame. And I start just, in my mind's voice, basically berating my body, saying, why did you do this to me? How could you fail me? I take such good care of you. How could you fail me like this? So really out of control. Now remember when I tell you that I didn't always master those premises that Norman Vincent Peale lays out. Mm-hmm. It's a lifetime of working on achieving those things. But there I was. Well, throughout this time, I finally, calm myself down, and I'm actually leaning against the bathroom wall, and I look up finally, and I see my reflection in the mirror. I didn't even recognize myself. Now, of course, I had been crying, so there's that. But it was just like a realization of that's me in that mirror. And finally, I became quiet, like, because I just like looked. And finally, when I did become quiet, I heard this voice coming from somewhere deep within me that said very quietly, I have been with you in your highest highs and your lowest lows. I have carried you forward when your knees buckled and you couldn't carry yourself. I have birthed 3 healthy, beautiful children, and I am here with you. I get emotional just thinking about it, and that was one of my greatest gifts that I received, was hearing that. I was moved to silence, just silence. Felt so many emotions. I will say shame, anger at myself, like all the emotions when I realized just what it did. But I will tell you that that was such a pivotal moment in my life, because at the time, we always hear, and that I still buy into this day, is like we're a soul being having a human experience. Well, I believed that by then. I'm in my early 40s. That's how I lived. However, the missing piece for me happened to be the whole body, mind, and spirit. I just looked at the body as just this vessel to carry out my soul's work, and never fully integrated what it means. What does body, mind, and soul really mean? And in those coming days, as I was awaiting my surgery, it just all assimilated, and I understood it. And it changed the trajectory of my studies, because I'm still studying. I was still studying all the metaphysical stuff. I started studying medical intuition. I started studying medical qigong. I started studying with a physician for about a year. I really wanted to go into the emotional side of our physical bodies when we aren't perhaps dealing with the emotions, because obviously I had not dealt with the emotions behind my original diagnosis. I thought I could just sweep it away, and that's not how it works. So that opened up, so many avenues for me to work on my own self. And another thing that opened up is everything sort of clicked with the energy work that I was doing, because I had gone on to obtain certifications in many, many, many things. I was searching. I was so curious, like Reiki, massage therapy, crystal healing, all kinds. I could name at least 10 or 12. I don't need to do that, but you get it. But the missing piece for me, and what came together at that time, was now my body was engaged. And when we talk about, connecting with our higher self or hearing messages from the universe, how does that come to us? It comes to us through our senses, through what we're seeing, smelling, hearing, feeling, sensing, all the clairs.
Yeah.
And where do they come from? Our body. It's our body. And it was like all of a sudden, now that I was the best teammate with my body, mind, and soul, everything opened up for me. And to this day, my body plays such an important role because of what I feel and sense through my body when I'm doing my energy work, my Akashic Records work, that wouldn't have been possible with the relationship that I had with my body before.
Yeah.
The other really important thing too was that while I was off recovering, I was allowed to drive and I was allowed to walk. So I would get the children to school and maybe go to a store because it wasn't very nice out, and maybe just walk around the store a little bit. And one day I found myself in a local metaphysical shop. And I happened to take a look at their bulletin board. And on that bulletin board was a little notice, because again, this is like pre-internet.
Mm-hmm.
And there was an invitation from an Akashic Records channeler. And she had an invitation to come to her home on a weekday morning where she was going to describe what the Akashic Records were and give like a philosophical group message. And I thought, well, I had heard of the Akashic Records prior to that, but really didn't know about them, didn't study them. And I thought, well, let's say it was a Thursday morning. Well, I could go to somebody's living room on a Thursday morning. Like, I don't have much else to do with the restrictions at that point. So I went. And Dr. Bob, I will tell you, the moment she started speaking, I was home. All the searching and all those certifications and everything led me to that point where I knew I was home. She described the Akashic Records. I'll describe them now, if you like.
Okay, please do.
Okay. So the Akashic Records are often described as like a etheric repository for every thought, action, and words of the soul forever. So if you're one to believe that we have many lifetimes, this is an eternity. So this is all your past lives of the soul, your present lives, and your future lives, if that's the linear way that you think, right? Now, some people describe it as a library because they say where it is written. And that's right. That's the other thing. Some people say, oh, I never heard of that. But we really have, because almost every single religion has referred to them, the Akashic Records, either as where it is written or the word. They just don't call it the Akashic Records. You might have heard our life review that we go through. That's all pulled from your Akashic Records. The thing that I like to say, though, is when I describe it as a library, I think it doesn't do it justice of the power and the vastness and the high vibrational frequency that the records are kept on, because the Akashic Records not only contain what was said and done, but the potentialities and possibilities of what could be said and done. So, when you were deciding what you wanted to do for your career, you might have, been narrowing it down from 3 different fields. And there's actually records for each of those, because that's potentialities that you were faced with. So it's dynamic, it changes. So just even thinking of the vastness of that, I think is just really important to get a hold of. But to simplify it, though, it's just a higher vibrational field where all of this is kept. So when she started describing the records and how she learned the records was through channeled writing. And that was another zap that I got, because one of the things I had studied was automatic writing. I took a class, I had all these books, but I could never master automatic writing. I just couldn't get it. It just didn't flow. Tried all the tips they give you, just didn't flow. But being that I write a lot and have written a lot in my life in various professional and personal instances, I always thought that writing should come easy to me and that this would be an avenue, a tool that I could use. So when she said that, I just knew that this is the time that I'm going to learn this channeled writing. So she shared the very beautiful group message. And then at the end of that message, she actually said that she would be teaching the Akashic Records. and the rest is history. So the thing that I want to point out about that, though, is that this is where the importance of synchronicity and our awareness of synchronicity. And when Dr. Norman Vincent Peale talks about having that divine support, we can actually see proof of that through what I'm calling synchronicities.
Mm-hmm.
And to me, a synchronicity is really when you know that the universe is like conspiring to lay everything out for you so that you come upon it and that you can receive from it. A little different than like coincidence, because it has a greater impact. And a lot of times I feel that synchronicity carries like a greater emotional impact. So that was certainly a synchronicity that years prior, I had had the cancer. Years later, I'm having additional surgeries because of that caused me to be off in the middle of the week that I never would have been off because of my, if I took off, it was because a child was sick, not for any other reason. So for me to be at that store, to see that bulletin board, to see that invitation, to be available on a Thursday morning, to be sitting in this woman's living room, to hear about what is now the basis for my entire life study, was quite synchronistic. And I really invite people to try to recognize synchronicities in their lives and claim them. Because once you find that you're aware of them and that you have that gratitude for them, it just seems like more and more come into your life.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so much so, just even talking about synchronicities raises a person's vibration. And all of the workshops I teach, my intuition circles that I have monthly, I start everything off with sharing synchronicities before I dive into anything.
Uh-huh.
And it's just so wonderful to hear what people have experienced. And it just raises the group, prepares us to then get into, our energy work, that whatever we're doing. But so, yes, that's where I came upon the Akashic Records. But I really wanted to spend some time telling you what was going on in the other part of my life, my corporate world. Don't worry, we're getting close. we're coming up in the decades.
We've got lots of time left.
Okay, you're my timekeeper.
Yeah.
Okay. What was happening is I was seeing a lot of success in my corporate life. I was an executive level manager, and I was spending, devoting a lot of my time and energy, very stressful, very high pressure job. And on the side, I was doing my sessions. I had been doing sessions even prior to the Akashic Records. I was doing some professional and personal development type coaching work, and I would work in some of these different energy modalities. Just here and there, I would work it in. Well, when I started with the Akashic Records, it probably wasn't for at least like a few years after I myself worked in my own records before I started introducing that into any work that I was doing with clients. And as they experienced that, they wanted more of that. Yeah. So then that whole thing switched more to, again, the basis was the Akashic Records, and everything that I had studied or had to offer would just come in secondarily and would be pulled in from what I'll call, generically speaking, the guides would pull it in, as necessary to help the individual. Well, so I have this side business then of doing that, and I have my day-to-day career. And because of what it was requiring, both sides were requiring of me, it got to be a lot. I was stretched really thin, still having the kids, the career, the studies. I will always be studying. So there's that along with helping the clients. And I started saying things to myself like, I don't know if I can do this anymore. I feel like I'm two different people. I have this corporate life where like my calendar is screaming at me, everybody's pulling at me, it's so stressful. But then I have this other life, my soul mission life, that is whispering to me. And it's like this just steady like contentment and peace. And I felt, first of all, like in my career, I was a very private person. I'm always a very private person, but I wasn't sharing any of this with, my peers or anyone that I was working with. First of all, because I didn't share personal things. But also, I don't regret it because there really wasn't a place for it. I wasn't going to walk into the conference room and say, let me do a visualization meditation with all of you. It just wasn't going to work. I was working with attorneys and CFOs and strategists and, executive level analysts, and there just wasn't a place for it.
Yeah.
Wasn't a place. And so I kept that all very private. There was maybe a couple of very close people in the work environment who knew that I had two lives, as I was calling it back then. But it got to the point. Oh, and because of that, interesting fact, because of that, so I was so private that I never even developed a website. Never had a social media presence. Now we're coming up to, the last decade. All my work is done by referral. And I know that's very old fashioned, and some people would question that, especially in this day and age, if I can't Google you and find something out about you. But what I have found is that there's really nothing better than a personal referral. Especially that's how I have experienced it. I have clients in 7 countries. I'm busier than I ever thought that I would be. Always wanted to do this in retirement. I'm retired 2 years. I actually thought that this would be like task number 1 when I retired, is to get the website and to work on things like that. And it hasn't been. It hasn't been. Like I said, I'm busier than I ever thought that I would be with this. I know in the future, in the very near future, I'm going to need that because of some projects that I'm working on. Definitely will need it. And so I'm setting the intention that somebody's going to come forward and help me with that.
Believe me, I tried to research you like I do all my guests, and there wasn't a whole lot to find.
Oh, and did that make you nervous?
Well, a little bit.
Yes.
But I thought, okay, we'll play discovery during the interview. But,
are you calmer now?
Yes, very much so.
Okay. I get it.
Yeah.
I really get it, and I do realize that. So that is in the works for the very near future. But still, I still notice, because I still like having different kind of readings from people, and I always take it from somebody who's already, who refers me to that person. Like there's so many people on social media now. Be cautious. We have to be very discerning. I will, and a lot of times when I feel that a client would benefit from some other type of energy modality or another professional, I would never refer them to someone that I didn't experience myself.
Sure.
So I myself move forward with discernment when I explore in that realm. So be careful.
By the way,
Okay.
just a question.
Okay.
Did you consult the Akashic Records before coming to this interview?
Of course I did.
Okay.
Of course I did. Yeah. Yeah. And believe me, they gave me, and it was through channeled writing, and I probably have half a notebook on things that were important in my spiritual journey that I
Okay.
hadn't even thought of. I don't know, the memories came from the record keepers. I wouldn't have thought of half of this.
Yeah.
So,
Okay.
and they also helped me whittle it down. When I said,
Okay.
"Oh, do I really want to say that?" Yes, you do. So, okay. So I definitely feel supported. And
Okay.
every major life thing, not even major, every minor life thing, I do employ the
Yeah.
assistance of the Akashic Records for myself. Yes.
And thankfully, you didn't get the message, don't do this.
No, I did
Okay.
not. I did not
Yeah.
get that message. It was, full steam ahead. So,
Okay.
yeah,
Great.
I did that. So, I think where I left off, though, was you can see where my self-talk, I started, where I was getting stretched really thinly, was I feel like two different people. I feel inauthentic at my day job. I feel like I'm not giving enough attention to my side job. Like I can't do this. I'm withholding information because I am very transparent as a person. Like even though I'm very private, I have nothing that I can't share with you about my life. It's just because I'm an introvert. I'm an extroverted introvert, if that makes sense. I have no problem talking, but I'm just a private person. And so I actually thought about pausing my energy work, my Akashic Records work, because of the demands of where I was in my career at the time, which was just not long ago, within the past, I'd say 7 years. And I went into the records and said, I can't do this anymore. Like, how can I be these two separate people? How can I be doing like what I feel is my mission on one hand, and then having this chaotic corporate life on the other hand? And their response, and I'm paraphrasing here because I will tell you it's really beautiful when it comes through the records, but the response was basically, what do you mean, how can you do it? You've been doing it for so many years and you're quite successful at it. And when we talk about balance, I mean, that's a whole different podcast. There isn't really balance. There's an ebb and a flow to our lives, and that was the balance that I had at the time. And I was defiant though. And I said, well, no, I'm not doing my spiritual work in my day job. So what do you have to say? What do you have to say for me about that? And certainly the wisdom came through as, let's take a look at your leadership style. How are you leading people in your career? And so we started the review. And the review was first that I've always treated people with dignity and respect and value. I really value people and what they bring to the table. I also am one for personal, professional development and advocacy. I will go to bat for you and push until you are just shining. And also realized through that work in the records that my whole mission in life, which is to inspire and support development and growth in any form. And I saw that I have done that through my career, and I would continue it in my career until I left 2 years ago. And, when I retired, people, they had a Zoom call because my employees were all over the nation, and they have a Zoom call for you after 40 years.
Yeah.
And One of the people said, there's one thing about you is that you never allowed us to be average. You always found things in us that we didn't even know that we had. And you always nudged us forward. And because of that, we always had the best teams. We were so innovative. We were just the best. We were always had the best like rankings and just everything. We had the best teams. And she didn't know it at the time, but that was actually like the biggest compliment that anyone could have ever given me. And I felt like with that statement, like my whole career was tied up in a bow. And I was just so grateful that those words came out of her because of my struggles that I just explained. And it is true. Like, I think the other satisfaction that I've always gotten, and this is in the spiritual side with my sessions or workshops and my business career, was that I will give you everything I know. And if I just plant a seed and spark a curiosity in you that helps you to go further and far surpass me, that to me would be success. And that's just how I view life. And as we see, going back again now to the book, you can see that struggle that I went through for those years, saying I feel like I'm being inauthentic or I can't do two things. You can see that, again, my self-talk was becoming my reality and creating more struggle for me. And once I could get that all straightened out and look at it in an expanded perspective, it all came together.
Yeah.
It all came together.
Yeah. So I met you at an Edgar Casey event.
Yes.
And in all this discussion, I've been waiting for, well, Edgar Casey and the Akashic Records, and
Right.
it all fits together. So can you just talk about how you got introduced to Casey, what he's
Yes.
meant so far, and why were you at that conference?
So I was introduced to Edgar Casey long ago. You know, on my spiritual journey, so many resources, wonderful resources were put in front of me, you know, in my desire to learn. And someone who was very close to me invited me to a local regional event that they were having. Oh, this is years ago. And for anyone who's not familiar, I've never been to the headquarters, but I come to almost every regional event that I can.
Yeah.
They're wonderful. They are just wonderful. And you know, speaking of Edgar Casey, I've been a member for all of these years, and mainly to go to because I enjoy the events. I enjoy seeing, you know, what the latest is that the regional group is doing, but also the website and all of the resources on the website, and the books and just everything that they offer. And you know, so while we're talking about Edgar Casey, and what was I hadn't come to find until much later, from when I was 10 years old. But those same things that I was learning in the power of positive thinking, Edgar Casey had brought that forth much earlier, you know, in the earlier 1900s, when he was bringing through all of his information from the Akashic Records about how our thoughts create our reality, about visualization, meditation, divine support. So yes, all of that comes. So it wasn't new, even in 1952 when that book was published. And if you realize that we're still hearing about all of that today, every spiritual teacher, they might try to put a little bit of a different spin, or maybe use a little bit different terminology. Like I said, I changed it to divine support instead of, you know, support through maybe Christianity or religion. So there might be different terminology used, but it's still what spiritual teachers are teaching today.
Right.
Yeah.
So speaking of religion,
Mm-hmm.
where are you with Catholicism?
Okay, well, so like I said, when I found that book, I was being raised Catholic.
Mm-hmm.
And I felt that I belonged there for sure. But, and I will say that I looked at God as a male father figure
Mm-hmm.
who was maybe sitting on a throne, maybe stood up sometimes in white robe. But I felt that God at that time was like great protector and a great support. But my view of God did seem to vary from what the Catholic Church was teaching because I never knew a vengeful God or a God who was going to try to catch me and make me feel guilty and wrong and shameful. That just was not in my world at all. And as I got older and was having children of my own, and I went to the Catholic Church throughout all of those years, and when I was because I really got something out of it, I wanted to hear what the priest had to say. But more and more, my viewpoints were changing. But come to when I was having children, I decided that I wanted the children to receive the sacraments. Mm-hmm. And their father was Presbyterian. So we decided that we would actually raise them in both churches, which was great with me because in his Presbyterian church, they studied the Bible more, which I found that the Catholic Church didn't.
Right.
So I thought it was the best of both worlds. I was very happy with how I chose to raise my children. And I always had the intention that after they received their confirmation, that they would choose. Where did they feel home? Where did they feel like they belonged? You know, what can they relate to? And that I would be perfectly happy with whatever they chose at the time. And how that played out was my children did receive their sacraments. And shortly after my son, my youngest, received his sacrament of confirmation, and I was still like struggling with, well, I think I believe this. I think I believe that. I can go along with this and that in the Catholic Church. But, the sermons weren't really touching me as they did before. I wasn't getting as much out of it. And I was really starting to struggle. We're in church one Sunday morning and we had a visiting priest. And that sermon that day was about what he called cafeteria Catholics, where you pick and choose what you're going to believe. Oh my gosh. I knew he was talking directly to me. And I said, that's me. And his message was, we don't have room for you. That's not what the church wants. We don't want cafeteria Catholics. Again, this silence came over me, like really hearing this. And I left that mass that day and I never returned. And I want to tell you, Dr. Bob, like this was a struggle because I had felt for all those years that I belonged there. And I think, just looking at it, because at the time and after I did start opening up to other people, finding that was happening to so many people that I would talk to, at least back then, what I find that could have been maybe helpful, I don't know, but there was nowhere for me to talk this out with anyone in the church.
Yeah.
There was no support of what do I do with these internal struggles that I'm having? Because I still call myself a Christian. I don't feel I have to label myself, but I certainly, and like after that, I explored other organized religions and just did not belong. But I really think that the church might have missed the mark in that. I don't have any idea
Yeah.
what the Catholic Church does these days, but at least back then, perhaps some people, I don't know about me, but perhaps some people would still belong or still feel like they belong and that
Yeah.
like they were home, because it does mean a lot when you're raised a certain way, and the whole belonging and the whole feeling of home and having, community. But after I searched, and didn't feel I belonged in any organized religion, I realized at that time that, okay, God, again, now when I'm saying the word God, I'm not looking at God as a man.
Uh-huh.
My
Right.
my definition, has definitely changed. But I still use the word God, universe, source. I think source is probably my word of choice, but I use them interchangeably. But I said, God, I see that this is up to me. Any relationship that we're going to have, any growth that we're going to have, it's going to be up to me. And I said, I'm ready to take it on. Like, I came through all of this. My biggest fear in life is now my mission in life. And I had no fear of God and no fear of me being in charge of my relationship with God. And so that's where I'm at today.
Yeah.
Yeah. I feel really great about it.
So what about your kids? Where'd they end up with all this?
So my children, my oldest has converted to Judaism.
Oh, interesting.
Yes. She studied for years. She's an adult, a very successful adult. Studied for years. Didn't tell me. She told me when she was about to go through the actual conversion.
So this is because she was marrying someone who was
No,
Jewish?
that she did this all
My
on her own.
goodness.
How she came about it was, she lives in Washington, D.C., and she started volunteering at a very large synagogue there called Six Sinai. And they have all kinds of events, and she started volunteering there. And through her volunteer work, they sometimes needed help with their services.
Mm.
So she started volunteering, even though she wasn't that
Yeah.
religion. And the exposure, she was drawn in. It felt like her truth. And I can just tell from her devotion that she's where she belongs.
Yeah.
I can't be more proud that
Uh-huh.
she has found where she belongs. And she's actually on the board of directors now.
Why?
Yeah. So she's really involved, and I'm so happy for her.
Yeah.
My other two children, they consider themselves Christians, and right now don't really belong to any organized church, but they still hold the Christian faith dear to them. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. I'm very happy for them also. I can see how it comes out in and how they're living their lives, and that makes me so proud.
Yeah.
So proud.
Okay, I'd like to steer us back to the Akashic Records.
Okay.
Because there's a lot going on right now in quantum physics. And in looking at the relationship between, say, the quantum field and the Akashic Records, and with all the studying you've done, I imagine this may be something you've looked at. If not, you're getting a surprise question here.
I'll try my best.
That may not be fair. How do you see the relationship between the quantum field and the Akashic Records?
I see it very closely related, because I think what these fields hold for us, these higher vibrational frequencies, is the frequency of creation.
Mm.
And I think that that is the thread that is the same. Because, like I said, the Akashic Records being so vast with all the potentialities, that really holds true the thought and concept of free will, and the knowing that we can, the Akashic Records are available to all of us as far as the frequency. It doesn't belong to a certain organization or religion or certain type of person. It belongs to all of us, and we all have access to that. And I think when we intertwine, like quantum physics and healing that's done, quantum healing, I think that there's a parallel, because it's all about vibrational frequency and creating, and where we can reach, reaching up from this very low, dense energy frequency that we tend to, I'll say, survive on. Yeah.
And then there's the concept of consciousness. And again, I make an assumption that with your reading that you have some opinions about consciousness. So where do you feel consciousness resides? And what is the relationship between consciousness and the Akashic?
Oh, okay. How does it relate to the Akashic Records? Well, let me think about the first question first. So consciousness, where does that come from and reside? My experience and what I would say about that is that consciousness, that your conscience really does come from your soul self, this higher vibrational soul being. And to bring it down into the physical, I always talk about the high heart, because that is where this soul being resides. And that's how we reach it, this higher frequency that our souls reside. And so all of the work that I do is taught by accessing the high heart. So as opposed to, for example, if I was teaching like a psychic energy course that would be going through the third eye, I don't teach that. I teach everything that goes through your high heart, which is where, and Edgar Cayce teaches this, about pulling more of that soul being here to earth. And that's how we access it. And it's not that I don't struggle with some of these things. I was just having a conversation the other day with a friend, and we talked about, we're all struggling, not to eat the sugar or whatever it is that day.
Yeah.
And is it our body making us do that? Is it our mind making us do that? Is it our soul saying, hey, I want some sugar while I'm living in this human form?
Yeah.
And it's really something to think about. But I think how we are experiencing this lifetime, as much that we can pull from that higher frequency wisdom from our soul self, whether that's through, I call it going into your high heart, but whether that's through meditation or prayer, or just going within and being silent, like when I just even talked about those few moments of silence that I gave me when I was, off on a tangent in my life, that's when we can open up and allow it to come in. Like, shut down some of this mind chatter and receive. And the universe is always trying to support us and get some assistance and support in. We just have to be still enough and observant enough and open enough to receive it, be aware of it first, and then receive it.
Yeah.
And I think that the Akashic Records ties into all of that, because just like in the book where they said we have, divine support, what I call divine support, but in the book, it was referencing Christianity and through Christ, and that's where the support was coming from. Now I can almost like replace that with the support that's coming through for me in the Akashic records. And it's certainly, that's not the only source of support, but it's a source that
Yeah.
I rely on the most, because I am able to reach that frequency and hold that frequency.
Yeah. How about soul groups? Because I know that when I've worked with somebody who I know who taps into the Akashic records a lot, she has done a couple readings for groups of people that I've been with.
Okay.
So that we get an idea of, okay, have we been together before? Are we traveling together? Is this just, a temporary thing that we're together? Or have we been together over lifetimes? And so have you worked with soul groups at all?
I have. And so interesting. I still continue to study life between lives, and near-death experiences and things, because I just want to know more and more and more. But it's already come, a lot of it's already come through, and I have studied it. But what I've experienced is, yes, there are soul groups. And though that we would be surprised that, I mean, I'm going to use the word like clusters. We have our immediate soul group, who really tends to be sort of at the same level of understanding, or perhaps even experience some of the same types of trials and tribulations, we'll say, or learnings, lessons that we came to learn. But there's also around the soul groups, I'll call them clusters of other soul groups, who have a familiarity with you. And there's, because our soul group, from my experience, tends to be small. I've been pulled into soul groups. Luckily, when I'm doing some of this work for my clients and their transitioned loved ones come through, some of them have really educated me. And I will say to the client, oh my gosh, your transitioned husband is really giving me some really important information for my work. And sure enough, the client will say, of course he is. That was how he was. And I ask for permission. I do want to connect with, your transitioned husband later, so I can ask more questions. So I have like a group of transitioned loved ones, some of my own and some of my clients, that have really come forward to try to sort that out for me. So yes, that is a thing. You would be surprised, or I was surprised, to see how many people in various clusters, though, will come forward to assist. And it's the same, like I'll give this to you and you give this to me. So a lot of times it's reciprocated.
Yeah.
And if it's not reciprocated in this life, I'll catch you in the next life and I'll reciprocate what you brought for me. So, so you may not have you may not be in the same soul group of maybe of your spouse. Most people think they are. That's not always the case, but it's certainly part of the greater soul cluster that will come in and learn lessons together.
Yeah. I have some other questions.
Well, along those lines, it's interesting things that I've learned, because clients often want to connect with their transition loved ones, and I'm not a medium. I make sure that my clients know I'm not I think they're called like experience.
Evidential.
Evidential. Thank you for that. I'm not an evidential medium. I do, at times, I can connect with transitioned loved ones. And what I have found, though, through the assistance of these souls on the other side that are helping me, I've made a little role for myself that I now ask clients how long the person has been transitioned from this lifetime. And I like to give it, has to be over, 7 months, 9 months. I don't like to connect prior to that because I have, and I've found that, even though we have no concept of time,
Mhm.
and we also hear, well, time's instantaneous, like 1,000 years on the other side might be a minute here. We have no concept of that. But what I have found in connecting with the newly transitioned is that they need some quote unquote time,
Yeah. Yeah.
as does the client.
Uh-huh.
So,
Right.
and you're working with the client, you're in the client's records, not the transition loved ones records when I'm doing my work. So that little time frame, but I was really surprised at some of the results I was getting. Some people will call and the loved one had, been gone for 2 weeks, and I really wouldn't know it,
Mhm.
beforehand. And now I ask and just gently
Yeah.
lay out some of my quote unquote roles.
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
there's a lot to work through when we experience a death.
So do you still do some Reiki on folks?
I don't do Reiki as much, although, no, I don't just do Reiki on people. But what is pulled through when I do my Akashic Records work, is anything else, like any other tools, I would say tools that the individual could use. Because, when you hear this information that's being channeled, um, it's all quite beautiful,
Hmm.
but they're really just words
Yeah.
until a person can make it very practical in their everyday life and put action behind it.
Yeah.
That's when it becomes wisdom.
Uh-huh.
There's such beautiful words. Well, beautiful words are beautiful words.
Yeah.
And we really need to be able to, grasp the wisdom. We really have to bring it down to a practical sense. And I think
Yeah.
that, um, that's one of the ways that, because of the corporate background and because I'm a very process oriented person, I think that that's one of the things that my clients appreciate, is that I do bring it down to the practical. So they get all the beautiful words, but then we try to drill down and bring it into some practical tools and actions that they're invited to use.
Yeah. So in seeking your services, do most people come to you with, I understand you do these neat things. Would you do some neat things with me? Or do they come to you with an issue and say, I have this problem. Can you help me work through it?
Yes. So how I work is, I ask clients to provide me with 2 or 3 open-ended questions that they want to focus our time together on. So when I talked about how vast the Akashic records are, if I were just to sit here and open your records, I wouldn't know where to go.
Yeah.
And that's, I think, at first that's a learning issue. Like, okay, where do I go? What do I
Yeah.
do? I could spend an hour just telling you things that you have no interest in hearing.
Hmm.
So what I find is, by having the client, just narrow it down to 2 or 3 open-ended questions and focusing our attention on that, that's where we go. So it could be anything. Like the biggest thing, the most common issues, I would say, are relationship issues,
Yeah.
any kind
Yeah.
of relationship issues. And then career and life purpose and
Yeah.
things like that.
We are at this terrible time where we
Okay.
have to end our discussion. I want to go on and on and on.
Time flies when you're having
Yeah.
fun.
uh, so I'm just going to give you an opportunity that I always give my guests, which is to leave the audience with a few words of wisdom, because this is probably the only time that you'll have this particular audience listening to you. So,
Yes. So I think, based on everything that I shared today, I think what I would share would be the invitation to just really become aware of your self-talk and what it is that you keep saying to yourself. Like, what is that broken record? If there is one, what is that broken record that keeps going on? And then to like think about how that may be holding you back. You know, is there maybe an expanded perspective that you could look at where maybe the opposite of what you're saying is true? Or you're just limiting your thoughts that could be potentially holding you back. And when I talked about the book and how I feel that that's a cornerstone, it's not about optimism. I'm not talking about optimism at all, but rather just being curious and being willing to open to that higher vibrational soul knowing, that soul wisdom. And it's in you. It's within you.
Yeah.
And I just thank you, Dr. Bob. Thank you so much.
Great words to leave everybody with. So audience, as always, take what you've heard and integrate it into your life if it resonates with you, and put the rest on a shelf until you're ready to deal with it. Until next time, this has been your spiritual journey.